SART. Many of you have probably heard of SANE, sexual assault response nurses. Well, they're members of SART teams often. And something else is pretty cool about Michelle. This isn't in your bio, Michelle, but Michelle also was instrumental in pulling together in the northern Indiana or central Indiana area a kind of a task force to look at the development of a community justice center. And she pulled in experts from around the country, including someone who was a former prosecutor in San Diego. And so Michelle is just one of those people who brings people together and gets things done. And she also was the recipient of the Special Courage Award, which was presented in 2010 by then U.S. Attorney General Eric Holder. And she also became the first ever recipient of the Distinguished Hoosier Award, which was presented by the Indiana AG. And right now, Michelle, in addition to writing this book called Found, she serves as the executive director at the O'Connor House in Carmel, Indiana. And that program basically provides women who are single parents that are pregnant or maybe homeless with safe housing and opportunities to improve their lives themselves and help protect their children. So have I left anything out, Michelle?
No, that's quite enough. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Well, hey, and before we get started, we want to do a really quick poll. So Jordan, you got the poll ready? We want to ask, we'd like everybody to just, answer this question for us. Do you think it's possible for someone who has experienced extreme trauma to find health and happiness in life? Just take a couple of seconds to answer that. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Can everyone see the poll responses? Give me a thumbs up or done. Can you guys all see that yet? Let's go ahead and end the polling. So 90% are saying, yes, we believe that it's possible. So we've got a lot of positive people here with us today, Michelle.
Yay. That's awesome. Right? That's great.
All right, take it away.
I love that. Awesome. Thank you so much. It's great to reminisce, Ginger, and hear how you talk about how we met and love those memories. And we met serving. So I love that. Thank you all for participating in this and taking interest in just how the darkness can really bring us into light. Because if you are a first responder, we all are advocates, I believe, in life. We're advocating for our families, for each other, for our friends, and those strangers, I hope too. If you ever have any experiences in trauma, in losing somebody, car accidents, anything, I feel like what I'm going to talk about today is for you, is for them. So hopefully you can get something out of this that maybe you will be helpful to somebody else. So before as I talked about first responders, and I'm sure we have some of community, and I know some of my friends may be on here today too, we'd like to take another poll because I would love to know who is in the audience. And as we're taking that poll, I'm just going to continue talking. This is actually the first Zoom that I'm doing since my book has been released as an ebook. So bear with me. I'm going to talk about the book a little bit, but I'm going to really present or talk about my journey and how I was in the dark and how that drew me into the light and how tough it was really to work through that. So I'm going to go ahead. We good with the poll? Let's see where we're at. So first responder, multidisciplinary team member, or community member, or other. Let's see where we are. First respond. Okay. Community, other. Okay. I would love to know. Didn't ask, but maybe at the end, we're going to do a question and answer. So please, if you have a question, go ahead and direct that question. I know Ginger and Jordan are going to be overseeing those questions, but please feel free throughout my presentation to ask those questions. Don't forget it, because we're going to answer those when I'm through presenting. That's my favorite time. So please have questions. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Let's do this. Okay, there we go. So here we go. Bear with me just for a minute. And let me get, and this isn't advancing. There we go. All right. So my favorite quote, no human interaction is neutral. It's either healing or wounding. I heard this quote long, long ago, probably about 3 or 4 years after my assault. And it was so impactful to me that I said, this is a perfect quote for maybe someday, well, really how I want to live my life. And that's why I include it in every presentation I do. If we really think about this on how our interactions is, and I will tell you that interactions with people affected me in either traumatic ways or positive ways. And going through the trauma, if it was a negative interaction with somebody, it affected my whole being, my whole day, sometimes my whole month. So I can tell you, and I know this sounds all cliche, but I will tell you, interactions, even a smile with somebody who maybe not be being polite or nice, can change their whole demeanor, because we don't know what they're going through. You know, I'm talking to you today about my journey, but I'm sure everyone on today has a story to tell. So just keep cognizant of that on how we're treating others, because there are a couple of things that really, interactions with people that really affected me through going through my healing. Now I'd like to introduce you to me. I look a little different in this picture. Obviously, I was younger, but I had bigger hair, and this was several years ago. You can see the red lipstick and the red blouse. Meet Michelle Meyer. This was me the year of my assault. So I want to introduce you to who she was. I was working a construction job. Life was finally going well for me this time in my life. I was, had a great job. I was instructing exercise classes and really was head of the exercise classes at the YMCA. And I just had started dating a guy. I was dating him for about a year. I wasn't a very trusting person from things I had gone through previously. So finally, after 6 months, I decided to talk to him. So we were dating, had been dating for about a year. It took us about 6 months to really, gain that friendship. And then we started dating. So life was going really well for me. So it's a September day, September 12th, as a matter of fact, driving home from work at 9:30 at night, had been on a construction site and dropped off two of my coworkers. And as I drove down my street, drove up to my front door, was driving up to my front door, I saw two guys with hoods over their head walking down my street. And I thought, I don't know that I would recognize them anyway, but they just looked out of place there. And my gut instinct told me to drive around the block. So that's exactly what I did. I drove around the block and took my time. And it's 9:30 at night, almost 9:30 at night. And I was exhausted. So when I came back down my street, they were gone. I pulled my car up in the front of my house. I grabbed my things out of my car and my hands were full, and I walk up to my front door. And the next thing you know, I went to put my key in the front door and I was on the ground. I have no idea what happened, but I lifted my head to feel this warmth running down my face. And it was blood running down my face, and this voice that came at me that said, "If you scream, I'll use this," as he shoved a gun to my face. So immediately I begged for my life. I begged him to take my things. I wouldn't tell anybody, just to leave me. I knew that moment that I was going to die. There was no question in my mind. And what was going to happen next. And so again, I continued to beg him. He told me not to talk, not to scream, as he shoved the gun to my back and picked up my belongings and dragged me to my backyard. That's where I saw 4 other feet on the ground and realized that two of these other people also had guns. As I conversed about what they were going to do, I took another opportunity to ask them to just leave me. I wouldn't tell anybody. And they proceeded to tie my hands behind my back and blindfold me and gag me as they went to the front to get my car and drove my car down an alleyway in the back of my house. And as 2 of them left, the one stayed behind with me. And I heard my car coming down the alleyway, and he proceeded to drag me across my backyard and they asked me to climb the fence. And obviously there's no way that I could do that. I was wearing a long skirt and a blazer, a button-up blazer that night. And they took off my shoes and they threw me across the fence and threw me into the trunk of my car. So as the car sped off and in the trunk of my car, I was able to get my hands free and, ungag myself, and try to search for a way out in my trunk. And as they hit the brake, the light came on in the trunk. And that's when I took the opportunity to search for a way out. In that moment, it was a very telling moment to me because, as a single female, I know my mom was always worried about me and I would always check in with her. I thought about, kind of lost my thought there, but I thought about what would happen if somebody, this happened to me, or so I was always aware of my surroundings. How could this have happened to me? And here I am. And I really couldn't believe it. But as I got my hands free, I was very afraid to make any sort of noise being in this moment. Maybe you think you would frantically try to get out of the trunk or kick on the trunk or, any way to get out. But I was trying to be as quiet as I possibly could. I was in the fight for my life in that moment. Oftentimes we judge people on, I would have done this, I would have done that. And I can tell you, it is totally different when you're in that situation on what you're going through or what you're dealing with or what your thought process is. I was totally in life-saving mode. So as I couldn't find a way out, I am a very faithful person. I prayed to God that I could tell my mom I loved her one more time, that my life might be spared that night. And as I was doing this, the car stopped. And I took a quick opportunity to take off a ring that I was wearing and a bracelet that I was wearing. The guy that I was dating had given me a bracelet and I was wearing my grandmother's ring, and I hid them in the crevice of the trunk, hoping that at least somebody would know that I was in the trunk of my car. So as they opened the trunk and they saw that I got my hands free and I was unblindfolded and ungagged, they dragged me out of the trunk and tied my hands tighter behind my back. Of course, there was some language going on, and re-gagged and blindfolded me. And then they proceeded to drag me down or really run me down this very gravelly alleyway. Because I had bare feet, I could feel the gravel under my feet. And they took me into this very closed in. I just remember stepping over. There was a bar or something that I had to step over. And they took me into this closed in garage and they ripped my clothes off and took turns raping me in every which way they could figure out. So I introduce you to Michelle Meyer because I don't know who she is. I lost my life that night in that garage. I will never know who she would have been. So as they, and in that moment, it's such an out of body experience. I just remember being so sick. And if I would have felt the physical pain of that evening, I'm not sure that I would be alive telling you my story. But it was definitely an out of body experience in order to be able to have endured that. So when they were finished, they pulled me out of the garage, drugged me out of the garage, and one of them tried to put my jacket back on, and tried to be nice and have it carry on a conversation with me. And again, I tried to beg for my life. They proceeded to then drag me down the alleyway and throw me back into the trunk of my car. And this is where I went unconscious. So I have no idea what happened or how much time lapsed until I came to hear this voice. And this time this voice was different. And I thought, I've got nothing to lose. I took a chance and I kicked on the trunk of my car. And this voice came back at me that said, I am Detective Arthur Billingsley of the Fort Wayne Police Department. Hold on, I'm going to get you out. this is the moment where I don't know if you've ever experienced where a nightmare has thrown you into almost it was real. Like this was something real. That's what I thought this was. I thought this is just a nightmare that feels really real because I've had one of those before. And I kept trying to open my eyes thinking this is not real. This is not real. I was in such denial when I heard Detective Arthur Billingsley's voice. And I do believe when I heard his voice come back that he was probably much more shocked to know that I was in the trunk of my car than I was to hear his voice. And it seemed like it took, hours before he got me out, but he said, hold on. But it was minutes before he actually, Detective Arthur Billingsley and I met eye to eye. And I want to just share a little bit what was going on with Detective Billingsley that night. He happened to be on a child investigation case, and he was truly exhausted. And for the first time, he was a single detective. He always would drive around. This time he went home and he said, I'm too exhausted. I'm not going back out. But he felt this nudge. And it was on the third nudge that he said, okay, I'm going to listen. I'm going to get back in my car and I'm going to drive out. Detective Billingsley had a choice, whether he was going to go turn right, or he was going to turn left. And he turned right. And that's how Detective Billingsley ended up down a backside street behind a restaurant called Banditos in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And that's where he happened upon two men at the back of this restaurant. And he became a little bit suspicious. However, this was closing time for restaurants. So he saw those two take off running and he watched where they went, and they went right to my car. As you can see, this is my car parked in a wooded lot. And that's where the lights went on in my car. And he was able to handcuff one of those guys that night. So once Detective Billingsley was able to finally get me out of the trunk of my car, when he opened the trunk, there were 1,000 lights. And I did not want to see anybody. I did not want to talk about what was happening. All I wanted was Detective Billingsley to be with me. I didn't want anybody else around. I show what immediate reactions I had. I had these and 1,000 million more that I can't even put a word to them. But I show you these reactions, and I'd like to take a moment to read something, an insert from my book, because, and it's about why I share my story. And so I'm going to share a couple of excerpts from my book just to give you a feel for what I was going through. But I share my story for one reason, that others might understand what is possible. I understand feeling alone and helpless. I feel like I would never be happy or safe again, but feelings don't tell us the truth about the future. So true. So I want to share these immediate reactions and tell you who became my best friends. It was fear, anger, and denial. And they started immediately once I got out of the trunk of my car. So you can imagine how I looked. I had just my blazer draped around me, and they did get a sheet and they draped that around me. And I don't know how I got to the EMS, but I ended up in the EMS with, of course, two of the drivers who were tending to my head injury. Nothing was said about my assault. And in the, once in the EMS, that's when I really began to start feeling those emotions. And that's when I began to really show those emotions, where I was crying and I believe I was in shock. And, I was halfway embarrassed, and I wanted somebody to acknowledge, affirm me, say something, but it was all about my head injury. So what do you do when somebody is experiencing all these feelings? And I couldn't even begin to vocalize what I was feeling. I was more doing it emotionally. So again, I want to share what was going on, because now all these professionals and these experts are tending to me per se. I have law enforcement wanting to ask me questions once I got to the hospital. I had the EMS drivers tending to my head. So right when I got to the hospital, there were detectives there waiting for me. And they wanted me to make a phone call, or they wanted to call somebody for me. So that one person that they reached out to was Chris, the guy that I was dating, to meet me at the hospital. I did not want anybody else to know. I didn't want my family to know. I didn't want them to experience this pain, what I was going through, the scariness, the fear. And I wanted to keep it just to ourselves. So I have all these professionals. I just felt like everybody was just coming at me. And I'm going to tell you what I needed, but I want to share another insert from my book for you. All these professionals, some with training specifically designed to help them handle a sexual attack, were singularly focused on the one person who had no preparation for this turn of events. I was confused, injured, in shock, exhausted, and terrified in a way that can only be fully understood by someone who has endured such a nightmare. The world around me was focused on punishing the perpetrators and preventing future crimes, but none of that could help me through the grueling hours and days that followed. Despite having family and friends in abundance, help did not come readily or easily. So I'm going through all of these reactions, and I want to talk to you a little bit about confusion, because this really fits in when we have, when I had these first responders who were trying desperately to go get these other two guys so it didn't happen to anybody else. And so they were asking me a bunch of questions, but I'm not quite sure that that is what I needed at that time. And so confusion really sunk in, and you can see that it's one of my last bullet points there. So I want to talk about this. I'm going to show you some crime scene photos. So again, I know we shared, I'm going to show you one that is at the crime scene. So just want to give you a prerequisite that those pictures are coming. So it's really kind of cool that I did take the time to get to know what first responders' positions are in order so that I could help others through, in this line of work that I got myself into, which has been a blessing ever since. But Fort Wayne Police Department shared these pictures with me, and I sat down to look at them. Each picture took me about 5 minutes to look at, just to be in present with them. So this was my house where I walked up to. And when I saw this picture, I saw the door open and I saw my things inside the door. And I thought, oh, they must have moved my things inside the door. And then I go to the next picture and I actually do see my things inside. And I thought, why did they move those and then take the picture? And then as I went to the next picture, actually, I still tell my story that I was knocked down in front of my house. I don't ever remember unlocking that door and getting inside. I believe that I was knocked down on the cement at my front door. So this is really telling to me, and hopefully to some of you as the first responders, that we try to put, even our day, if you line up sticky notes and you say, this is what happened first and second and third and fourth throughout your day. And law enforcement, this best when you're reporting on, you're going to a crime scene, put it in order to how it all happened or what you experienced. It's really difficult to do. So we as a society, and when I was trying to answer questions and tell my story, when you see the news segment and you look at this and you think, well, this is what I would have done. Why didn't she scream? Why didn't she run? Why, I still do that. I'm guilty of still doing that, but it's good that I'm cognizant of it. And I'm just sharing this so that we can all be cognizant together. So I love this. When society's expectations regarding the attack are not met, The victim's behavior is often re-examined to fit another scenario that we believe makes more sense. Because guess what? When people the next day were watching this on the news, they were going, okay, she was, walking up to her door, or one of the guys was caught, or two of the guys were caught. Okay, good, we're safe. I wasn't out. She was out late at night. I don't go out late at night. Check that box. All the things that try to make us safer, or that, that it doesn't meet what we fit the scenario, then we're okay with it. But we're looking at who's on the news, that, oh, she was this, or if they had any background on me, right? Then it's going to make us feel better. I hope I'm saying that so that you understand, but it makes us feel better and maybe safer, or I'm not her, so I'm okay. Or she should have done this, or she should have done that. So it's really hard for us to make those scenarios. I think it's better for us to re-examine our own conscious and how these things really happen. And again, we look back on my quote on how can we support one another. So who I became, I'm going to give you another excerpt from my book, but I became somebody who I really did not like. I walked around in fear, and I walked around in anger. I have never been an angry person, but I was really angry. I was angry at all of you, because most of you probably were going on your daily lives when this happened to me, and nobody could even reach what I was going through internally. It was really difficult, and it's really hard for us who have had traumatic events or sexual assault. It's really hard for us to explain and express, because even though I had friends and family and they were supportive, I couldn't get out of it. I couldn't break through that cellophane that was just wrapped around me. Nothing could break me through it. I had to go through it. It wasn't over, around, or under. I had to go through who I had become, actually. And I think I had to become this person, in this dark, and maybe who's somebody that I didn't like, because I actually had to go through that and feel those feelings, and actually feel those feelings. And it was really difficult. And I took one step forward and 10,000 back. But that one step forward was a huge leap. And that's what we have to remember in life, that those steps forward are huge, are like gold to us who are going through things, because those steps forward, we are taking those steps forward, even though we're taking 10,000 back, because those 10,000 back are actually going through something, are feeling these feelings, who I became, are going through, the going crazy in this abnormal situation, are, the depression, the anger, the sadness, the fear that I felt, the fear that I lived through 9 months, sheer fear of not being alone. It was 9 months of never being alone, not even for a second. I actually would walk around and grab Chris's shirt whenever we went out. I mean, I had to be like almost attached to him. I was afraid for anybody to be behind me. I still won't sit. I want to sit in the corner. I don't want to sit where there's an open window, or where there's an open, put me against the brick wall. That's where I want to be. So this is who I actually became. So here's where I'm going to read another excerpt from my book. I tried to appear strong whenever I was around people, but in my heart, mind, and soul, a perfect storm was brewing. Every activity, behavior, attitude, or habit that was comfortable before the attack became a trigger. Even the personality traits that I had defined me, trust, independence, fearlessness, and innocence, were altered. I felt unrecognizable in every way, and I didn't know where or how to find my way forward. The book talks a lot more about this, and I want to take the opportunity you're going to, if you do choose to read my book, you're going to read about a friend that I chose to be by my side. throughout this, years following. And my friend wrote a letter, and she wrote about the old Michelle and the new Michelle. I have many aha moments that have gotten me to this point. There are many, many aha moments, but this was one of them. And I just want to read a couple of lines. It was a 3-page letter, and it was to the judge on how what these 3 guys did to me affected my life. The old Michelle was always smiling. The new Michelle never smiled. The old Michelle was always boisterous when she talked. The new Michelle was so quiet, you had to strain to hear her when she talked. The old Michelle had a contagious laugh. The new Michelle never laughed. And it goes on and on and on, how I had my whole life planned and I had no future in sight. But it goes on and on. My girlfriend wrote that letter, and that also is in the book. I also had a fear of, you can see contracting AIDS. So not only is, all of this emotional stuff going on, but there's also health issues with what I went through. So there was so much that it was hard to compartmentalize who I had become and, where I was going. So I'm going to talk a little bit too about the media and how that wasn't really helpful in my healing. As time went on, again, I said I tried to find ways to help me through it, therapy. And I was heavily into therapy once a week. I don't know what I would have done without going through therapy. I really shut off all the outside and all of my friends. I did end up going back to work, and that was a very difficult thing for me to do. I would lock my door and not let anybody in my office. It almost felt like I was imprisoned in my own life. So everywhere I turned, it seemed like 3 years of my life, it was either in the media or somebody knew me. I felt like I wore a big R on my forehead. And almost, I'm really exaggerating, but it seemed like almost every day there was something in the newspaper about these 3 guys. So they did catch the other 2 within the next couple of days, and they tagged them the trunk rapist. I was their 5th and final. We don't know how many there are out there, but they know of 4 other women that were similar attacks, and there were 3 other trials that these guys had to face. So the media became a big deal, and I wanted to hide from them. But this just gives you an example of one of the newspapers. So this is what I needed that I didn't so much get, but I think we are so much better in how we're responding. And that's where I have been blessed to do 18 years at Prevail, which was a victim awareness and support program in my own community when I moved here, which was truly amazing. And it was a God thing to me that now I get to serve and do something about, use what happened to me for the good. So I needed to feel safe. And what I needed most of all from my family, friends, from those first responders is I needed a chance to just breathe that night. I needed even law enforcement because they were way over my head. And here they are, with this authority. And I just needed them to sit and be present with me and just let me breathe for a minute and feel safe with them. I certainly needed information, and I needed more information than they could have possibly given me. And I needed that information given to me 3 times. I needed it repeated. I needed permission to express my emotions. I was really embarrassed for, how I was acting, and why should I have been embarrassed? I wanted somebody to tell me it's okay. I want to affirm your feelings. Like, even to say, I don't even know what I would be doing right now, so we're just here to be with you. I needed to make my own decisions to kind of take control. I need to be able to trust, obviously, respect. I had to endure a Ended up being a 7-hour sexual assault nurse examiner, what we talked about first, but a forensic exam. And the Fort Wayne Sexual Assault Treatment Center was amazing. They were brand new, so they were learning kind of right along with me. But it was a 7-hour exam. Now they're not that long, really. But that's a hard job to do, is to collect that evidence. But I didn't really thoroughly understand it. So I needed privacy in that moment, where somebody wasn't knocking on the door or a phone call wasn't being answered. We really don't know what we need in that moment. And I couldn't have told you this is what I needed in that moment. So it's us who are advocates that are going to help pay this forward to let somebody else know that can help somebody else. So I just needed somebody to listen, to be present, as I talked about, to be for real. And one contact person. I believe there were 21 different law enforcement detectives on my case, which, yay, I'm glad they paid special attention. I needed to know there was hope. Hope was not in my vocabulary for about 3 years. So then I had to face the judicial system. Again, very difficult time for me because it brought everything back up. But this was one of the most difficult times as I was beginning to heal. I saw this headline in the newspaper that said, "State seeks to drop some charges against rapist." When I saw this, I was paying really special attention to these headlines, not knowing that they were actually talking about me in this headline. And as I began to read, I realized that they were dropping all the charges for one of my attackers that did the most damage to me, that knocked me down on my front doorstep, that led the whole way, that repeatedly raped me, that stole my credit cards that had blood on them. He actually is serving no time for what he did for me. This took me 10,000 steps back in my healing. And nobody let me know this. The communication wasn't there, and that was difficult, very difficult for me. So guess what? I became very uncooperative and very unresponsive to the prosecutor's office, to advocacy, and I'm sure that made it very difficult for them. And what do you do in this situation, right? And I've looked at it, and that's why I really got to know all the different disciplines. And listen, it's hard to be a prosecutor, and it's really hard to be law enforcement. It's really difficult to be an advocate. And now I understand that I wasn't giving grace back then. So this just talks about how the justice system can re-victimize somebody. And I think it's especially important for us as first responders, us as family members that are helping somebody through this, that it can be re-victimizing. And it's the justice system that we have to go through. And they have, they have to follow their protocol as well. As hard as it is to understand, the offenders have more rights than what we do as victims. So that was very difficult for me as well. And again, very difficult for me to be responsive and cooperative. I was as cooperative as I could have been under these circumstances. So you can see some of these things, it's just re-triggering when I had to, all of my trials or all of the court dates got postponed. So we would show up at the court and it would get postponed, and I'd actually be with some of their family members and get called names. And I thought that they were going to come and get me. I mean, I thought they had my name. I knew they had my name. I thought they had my address. It became very scary and put me back in that place of being rescued. So, it was very difficult continuing going back to, the courthouse and facing them time and time again. And the judicial system for me took 3 years. And I'm going to read you another Insert from my book. The justice system is imperfect for sure, and reliving the trauma was only possible because I knew it wasn't about me. The fight for justice was about more than fighting against those who committed crimes. It was about fighting for something bigger. I was fighting for the safety of women everywhere who have been brutalized and for a safer world. Court dates were postponed multiple times, and the resolution I longed for was prolonged again and again. The waiting was excruciating. Every court appearance would bring me face to face with the pain, the humiliation, and the fear, not to mention the faces and voices of my attackers. Each time I had to recount the events of that night, I would go right back to that brutal series of events and reopen the wound. Every court date felt like I was being brutalized all over again. Having to choose between personal healing and public safety feels like a no-win scenario during the legal process. I could only hope surviving justice would be worth the personal price I, along with the other women, paid. I say that being here talking to you, it didn't come without a price. So that was kind of perfectly aligned with that segment in my book. What went wrong? And I think I really communicated this to you as well, but communication is so vitally important. Being present with somebody, no matter what they're going through, means everything to somebody that's going through something. We have busy lives. It's a crazy busy world, especially right now. If you can give somebody your undivided attention for a few minutes, that's the best gift you can ever give someone. I knew when somebody was present and I knew when somebody wasn't. And the present people are the people that made a difference in my life. And those are the people that I took time for and with. I really let go of all the people that weren't present in my life. I mean, that's what it became for me. I needed a quick fix. I needed that therapist who was going to tell me, okay, you're better now. And I know we have some therapists on the line, so I appreciate you. And I gave you a run for your money. Trust me, I wasn't the easiest person to be with. It was hard. I wanted a quick fix. I wanted to be better tomorrow. I fought for Michelle Meyer for a year. I wanted her back, and I was desperate for her back. So I get the question, and I put this in my presentation because everybody wants to know what happened to these 3 guys. I am super blessed, along with the 4 other women, that they are in prison for life. Pretty much, although the 19-year-old, you can see that this was their age when they attacked me. The 19-year-old, he could get out, but he would be older. He received 70 years. So they let me know when any of these 3 guys move prisons. But, you know, the 21-year-old received 210 years. The 23-year-old, who's serving no time for me, got 320 years. And we do not hear that, right? I know you who work in the judicial system, that's hard. We don't see that enough right now. 80% of all sexual assaults are, those assaults were by somebody who knew somebody. So, and I can't imagine that, somebody that you maybe love and trust. And that's why we have our Child Advocacy Center at Traverse City. So I commend you guys for that. So why are we needed? Why are we all needed? And, you know, I almost took this out, and I thought twice about it because, again, I say we're all advocates. Why are we needed? We're needed as friends, as family members, and we need to somehow have, even if it's a slight, I don't expect you to ever understand, and I don't want you to ever say that I understand the pain you're going through, because that's probably not a really good thing to say to a victim. But at least you can, on the inside, have some kind of understanding. But we as victims turn to drug and alcohol because guess what? That makes you feel better, right? And in that moment, you'll do anything to feel better in those darkest days. Contemplate suicide. Depression definitely sinks in. And of course, post-traumatic stress disorder. I experienced all of these. I mean, suicide, I didn't do drugs, but I drank. I would have a glass of wine and then I have another glass of wine and think, wow, if I could, and even sometimes today, I think, oh, drink a glass of wine. It kind of makes you feel better if you could just walk around with that happy go lucky kind of feel. It never got to a point where I was abusing it. And I recognize that, and I'm glad I did. But a lot of time victims don't realize that. And I can understand that. I truly can understand that. Did I want to end my life? I had no purpose in life. There was no purpose for me in life. I was depressed. I mean, I wasn't the person that my friends knew me. I was embarrassed to show them the person that had become. So that's why I shut myself off from the world and only picked that one friend and Chris to be around. And my family was super supportive. So I have my mom and my sister. I stayed with them. I lived with them at times, super supportive, but it was really difficult. They were going through their own trauma. I'm going to talk about that next. So we just need to realize that these are some things that victims turn to, or those who are going through trauma turn to. How can we change that? We can change that by being present in their life, sitting with them, listening to them, offering just to be quiet with them. You don't have to say anything. Sometimes our words turn into, we're like, oh my gosh, I just put my foot in my mouth, because I've had people say, you're so lucky. I don't see anything lucky about it. I have worked with victims, like I said, for 18 years, and I've had several victims say, people have said, you're so lucky. And that's probably not the very best thing to say to somebody, because they don't see anything lucky about it. So I'm sorry this happened to you. Sometimes that's okay for people, sometimes that's not. So it's, us as advocates, again, it's very hard even to just sit and say, I just want to be with you. I just want to sit here and be with you, if that's okay. If you want to talk, please, feel free. So now I'd like to get to the happy part of my presentation. And this probably is the most emotional part of my presentation for me. I would like to introduce you to Detective Arthur Billingsley. There's a segment a news segment that I show when I present, and Art actually uses his voice, and he said, I don't feel like a hero. And you can read about this again if you read my book, more details about this. But he said, I don't feel like a hero. I didn't get to her in time. Art is like a brother to me. We have done presentations together in Dallas, Texas, or Austin, Texas. We have worked together. We have become friends. We have become family. I am super blessed that he was the one that was there that saved my life that day. We're very close. He's a very close family member. We celebrate life together. We celebrate birthdays. We celebrate September 12th. Every year we talk to each other. I got to see him this year and celebrate because he saved my life that day. And I get him a hero thing every day, something that says hero. I write him a card. I hear his voice on that day if we can't be together. But then I'd like to introduce you to my son, who is named after the man that saved my life. So Christian Arthur. So meet my son, Christian Arthur. I never believed that this would ever be possible, but it was because of you, people like you, and my family and my friends who got me to this point, and the dream of sharing my voice and hope with other people, that hope is imaginable, hope is in reach. So Christian is named Christian because he's named after somebody else I'm going to introduce you to in a moment. They share a birthday, but so knew that when I had a boy that he would be named after Art, but he calls him Uncle Art. So it's really cute. He knows him not by nothing else besides Uncle Art. So now I'd like to introduce you to my family. This is hope realized and dreams realized. This is my son, Christian, who you met, my husband, Chris, who never left my side. So yes, the guy that I was dating, there's a whole chapter that's called Chris in my book. He is a true hero. And he stood by me when I was ugly and mean to him and pushed him away and tried to get him to leave me every day for a couple of years. I tried to get him to leave me because then I could say, I told you so. You couldn't do this. And he stayed with me. And it's grueling. It's grueling to live with somebody who doesn't have hope and who is in the dark and sees everything as negative and nothing positive. And he stuck through me. And I'm glad he did, because our life is so beautiful together. And it was that pain that I had to go through. And sometimes we have to go through that pain with somebody to realize the light and the brightness that it can be. And sometimes people who don't experience things don't get the opportunity to see that. I really get the opportunity to really know myself and have this beautiful life with this beautiful family. And then I'd like to introduce you to my daughter, who I watched my mom raise two girls, me and my sister. And now I get to realize that relationship that I had with my mom, with my daughter too. So it's really beautiful, and I'm certainly blessed. And this is where there's so much more that I could share. And I'm looking at the clock right now, and I want to make sure that I have time for questions, but I have more in my presentation that I'd like to share with you. And it's about my kids' favorite chapters in the book. And I love this the best. So this is the very first time that I am presenting this and presenting my book. So this is really special to me. I hope it's special to you as well. So I asked my kids, first I want to tell you, it was a really special moment. My kids or my husband did not read my book until it was a book. Unfortunately, they didn't get to read it in book form, but when it was all finally done and gone to print, they got to read the paper version of it. And my daughter, when she finished it, she came and hugged me for about 10 minutes with tears in her eyes. And she goes, "Mom, it's really good." So, and my son, same thing. "It's really good, Mom." And my kids, I believe my kids, they are my true testimony. They would tell me if it wasn't. So I'm glad that I can share my voice with the world and that hope and what is possible. But here's my kids' favorite chapters. Christian is chapter 14, and it's called The 4th of July. I was stunned, but enlightened, and my heart exploded when he told me this was his favorite chapter. And I asked him why. And he said, "Mom, it shows what is possible after a tragedy, and to realize that you can have a great life." And then he said that dreams do really come true if you really work at them, and you really worked at them. And he said it gives him hope to have that kind of love. So a little tidbit about the 4th of July, and you're going to hear it. I might not share it with any other audience. Maybe I will. That's when Chris and I became engaged. So that's that chapter. And, my son is 21 now, and relationships are very important to him, and he's realizing some really beautiful relationships. And he says, "I hope that I can have that love that you and Dad have one day." My heart totally exploded. So going from those very dark moments to realizing this is truly and totally amazing. I have 2 signs hanging in my house, and they say the same thing. And it says, "Life doesn't get any better than this." It's in my bathroom when I wake up, and it's on the way out the door. We walk out the door every day. Life really does not get any better than this. He said, "Yours is a beautiful love story." And then my daughter's favorite chapter is chapter 5, and it's rescued. So we come from one extreme to another with my kids. Her favorite chapter is rescued because it was, when I said earlier, and I wanted to say this earlier in my presentation, when Art Billingsley and our eyes met, it was an amazing moment. And I give you, hopefully you'll be able to visualize it in the book. It was really a moment that is indescribable. And we have this indescribable bond. But yeah, I'll leave it at that. But she said, I'll just read. "I remember making eye contact with her." This is from Art. I remember making eye contact with her and my heart just sank. My mind was in total shock. And then I said, I locked eyes with him. I felt a much needed rush of hope. The things that go, and I want to read this quote. I'm going to see if I have it in my next. Okay. I want to read this. The things that go wrong for you have a lot of potential to become part of your gift to the world. Krista Tippett says that. That's also in my book. I'm so, the best gift that I've ever gotten in this world is to be able to serve those in trauma and to have the two positions that I have had in life, these later in my life, from Prevail to the O'Connor House, has been the best blessing that I could ever imagine in life. Not very many people get to wake up and do what they love for work. So I'm very blessed with that. I want to back up because I didn't introduce you to our dog Prancer, who is truly amazing. She's an amazing dog. So I just remembered that I didn't introduce her. Okay,
Prancer.
she is. Okay, here's another quote. You'll see some quotes in the book. They are very depictive of each chapter. This is one of my favorites, and I hope that if you leave with anything that you will remember this quote. I am not interested in whether you've stood with the great. I am interested in whether you've sat with the broken. Thank each one of you for sitting with the broken, because you're going to make a difference in somebody's life, and they may never tell you. You may never know that, but I promise you, you will. And they may not name their son after you, but they will remember what you did for them for the rest of their lives. I remember every detective I talked to. I've gone back to them. I have thanked them. I have apologized to some of them for maybe some of the not nice things that I said to them, but I've taken the opportunity to do that. I've taken the opportunity to learn about those different disciplines. So when others are disappointed, that I can express, what their roles mean as well. That's really important to me. And we named Christian after Chris. I just remembered that I didn't tell you that because they were born on the same day, October 12th. So there you have it.
Michelle, thank you so much. Oh my goodness. Again, your strength and courage just resonates. You just exude this. Thank you for sharing this. And I have to tell you, this is the first time I've heard you tell that story since the very first time. And it's, wow. I mean, just as powerful now as it was then. So thank you for sharing that. Anyway, we do have a couple of questions. I know it's 5 o'clock, a little bit after. So people may have to jump off. We do have a couple of questions that have come in. One of the questions was, how old were your kids when they first learned about what happened to you, Michelle?
Good question. They were very young. Christian started asking me, is Uncle Art really my uncle? And I would say, yes, he is, in our heart. And then just because he did, with having a detective as your uncle, it was really cool, right? The car and all. And so he would do like different reports at school on him. And then he started to ask me, has Uncle Art ever saved anybody's life? And I said, yes, he does every day. And then I realized, in doing this work, I remember sitting on the beach in Florida, and I shared with Christian when he was probably 7 to 8 years old, parts of my story. And then he began to ask questions like, where did Uncle Art find you? And so totally opened up. Olivia actually learned about it when she was 5. That's when I was awarded the Special Courage Award in Washington, D.C. And she actually saw a video that we were going to show, but that is on my website that you can go view. I know Ginger you were going to say something about that. But so I told them at a very young age. My kids know the depth of my story, obviously now, but they did at a young age. My belief is, if we're not sharing our life with our kids or what we experienced in depth, then why do we expect our kids to share their experiences with us? So good question.
Hey, Jordan, I think you've got a couple more in there too, right? Don't you?
I do. We had one that said, I know there's no time limit on healing, but they wanted to know, when did you feel hope again?
Great question. You know, I didn't realize that I was really feeling little blurts of hope throughout. The first 3 years, I will tell you, were really difficult, and I believe that it's because there was nothing, there was no finalization to the justice system. It just kept going on and on and on. I believe walking out of the courthouse for the final time, I thought, I can do this. I can put one foot in front of the other. Now I can really make great strides moving forward. I found glimmers of hope in people. Again, if you read my book, the very beginning talks about bits and pieces and how people walk into your life for a reason, whether it's for a good reason or not such a good reason. You know, I believe that. And I believe that, God put Chris in my life and Wendy in my life. He wrote the letter for a reason, and I utilized those reasons. So I found glimmers of hope in them, not realizing that that was hope. But now hope is huge. It's everywhere I turn. I can find hope even in the dark times.
Can I ask a quick follow-up question on that, Michelle? So do you remember a moment when you made that pivot? Or was it kind of a gradual process for you?
I think it was a gradual process. Certainly knowing that, because even after I walked out of the courthouse, again, there's so many stories within these stories. Chris and I, it was difficult going through that. And I actually thought, okay, our relationship is going nowhere. We're older in life, we were in our 30s. We're going nowhere. So I asked him, where are we going with this relationship? And he wasn't at that time even thinking about marriage. Is he gonna ask me to marry him? No. And he told me that, so I thought, oh, okay. And then kind of got an attitude, but here we are today. It's funny, you'll have to read it because that's really a funny story today. But when he did ask me, I thought, gosh, okay, you underestimate yourself when you go through things like this. Like, nobody's ever going to have belief in me. I don't know. It cuts down your self-esteem. I mean, and I had low self-esteem to begin with when this happened to me. So it really did cut down my esteem, and like, nobody's going to see me worth anything. Like, I'm never going to have any glamorous job or, I was telling myself all these lies and not believing it. So it was therapy my therapist, Jocelyn, who really helped work me out of that and change my belief system.
Oh,
so
Right.
Jordan,
one more.
Yeah, let's do one more.
And I did want to mention, someone in here said they saw you and Arthur in Austin and that your story changed your life.
I love that. I would love that person to reach out to me. I would love hearing that.
They've also ordered your book already and it's waiting on our
Oh, thank you so much. Oh my gosh. I have so much gratitude for everyone. Thank you.
The last question, what does your relationship with your daughter look like regarding your fear that this will happen to her?
I write about that in the book a little bit. Yeah. Huge. When I had my kids, it was huge. I thought, oh my gosh, I'm bringing my kids into this world that I don't feel that's not so safe. My kids are my legacy. There's a chapter that's a legacy chapter, and I talk about the work that they have done and the speaking. My kids actually spoke with me. Big chapter. The light of that was a moment engraved on my heart. Love for you to read about that, but that's why that's my daughter's favorite chapter is Rescued. She actually said in a speaking engagement, she said, because she said, I wouldn't have wanted this to happen to my mom, but my mom wouldn't be who she is if this wouldn't have happened to her. So I think that Rescued chapter really touches her in an emotional way.
They gave me permission, the person who said they saw you, to tell you who they are. Angela Henderson.
Oh, Angela. Yes, we're friends. Hi, Angela. Thank you so much for joining. She's awesome. She's an awesome, amazing advocate. Thank you. Well, but anyway, I know that didn't really answer the question, but yes, my daughter and I, we have a very close relationship. We're very vulnerable with each other. We're honest and open, and yes, I think about that and pray for her every day. You know how we say, don't walk alone, that puts so much pressure on us that it's, we should be able to walk outside alone in the dark and go to the library or go somewhere. But unfortunately, these times don't allow us to. And yes, I always take a friend, but still we should have that right. And we shouldn't, that's almost like victim blaming. Well, you shouldn't have walked alone. It's not the person walking alone's fault. We put that blame on the person, the attackers. So.
Yeah. Well, Michelle, thank you so much for
Oh my
sharing your
gosh.
story. It's been great to have you here, and thank you for your candor and honesty and just, your vulnerability in sharing all of this. We so appreciate you. And I would encourage everyone to go to Michelle's website. It's Michelle Corrao michellecorrao.com. And if you have other questions we didn't get to that you'd like to connect with Michelle, is it okay for people to email you?
Oh my gosh, please do.
Okay.
I would love to connect with you. Also, if you do read my book or order my book, it's on like 1,800 platforms right now for ebook, but it's not released, the physical book, not till February 9th. But if you do, I would love a review from you.
Absolutely. Yes.
Thank
And
you so
I've read the
much.
book and it's so powerful. So thank you. All right. Thanks so much, Michelle. Have a good evening, everyone.
Thank you
Take
so
care.
much, everyone. God bless.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
We'll stay on for a few minutes as people exit and in case we have any
Awesome.
additional responses. All right. I think we will close with that. Thanks a lot again, Michelle, for taking the time to do that.
Oh my gosh. Thank you guys so much. Oh, we can't hear you, Ginger.
Oh, that's always best, right? Can I mean, it really is. And Jane, I don't know if you're still on or if you had to step away. So can you undo Jane? Is that possible?
I'll ask her to start video. She's in there. I don't know if she's connected to audio or not.
Okay. Well, she's in Florida right now, but Michelle Jane is our past board chair and is a dynamo and wonderful. So I saw her still on here. So I didn't know if she wanted to.
I saw her
chime
trying to
in.
get back in. I was like, oh, I'll let her back in.
Okay. Oh, you let her back in. Okay. I was like marking around. I'm going to go ahead. Let's go ahead. I don't think